Hi, Professor Cat here. Today I'm going to show you how to use the percent proportion equation to find missing parts out of a whole. For example, let's say I have 30 students. And out of my 30 students, I know that 20% of those students have purple wands. But I want to solve for how many students is that? What number of students have purple wands? I can use the percent proportion equation to solve that problem. Let's write our teach point. What I want you to remember that you can do today and every day is I can write percent proportion equations, cross multiply, and isolate my variable to find missing parts or the numerator. Write that down and then we'll get started. So let's look at example 1. 25% of the 32 guests are penguins. So the information that I have is that there are 32 guests in all. And of those 32 guests, 25% of them are penguins. So up here, we have 32 question marks to represent the total guests. And they are question marks because we don't know which ones are penguins and which one are other animals. Let's write a percent proportion equation to find out how many of these are penguins. So I'm going to write my equation where I have the percent is equal to 25 over 100, and the proportion is equal to an unknown number. I'm using the variable a over 32. So when we're solving a percent proportion equation and we're looking for a missing part of a whole, we can use a as the variable. You could really use any letter you want, but most examples have a. Our next step is going to be to cross multiply. So we've completed step 1, writing a percent proportion equation here. Now we're going to cross multiply. 100 times a is 100a, and we can set that equal to 25 times 32. So if I put 25 times 32 in my Muggle calculating machine, I get that 100a is equal to 800. That's step 2. The last step is to isolate my variable. I can see that these numbers are both divisible by 100. So I'm going to divide 100a by 100, and I get a. And I get that that's equal to 800 divided by 100, or 8. So I know that 8 of my guests are penguins, and the rest of my guests could be any other animals, but I know that 8 of them are penguins. Another variant you could use to solve this is instead of saying that 25 out of 100 is equal to a over 32, you could use what you know to be an equivalent fraction. You know that 25 over 100 is the same as 1 out of 4. So you also could put 1 out of 4 is equal to a over 32. Then cross multiply to get 4a is equal to 32. Then you could divide both sides by 4. And you would get a on this side, and you would get 8 on this side. So again, you would get that 8 of the party guests are penguins. Let's look at our second example. Suppose I ask you to solve. We expected 90 guests, but 130% of that estimate came. How many guests actually showed up? In a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause this video and follow 3 simple steps to finding how many guests actually showed up. The first step that you're going to do is you're going to write that percent proportion equation. And remember that this time, your missing part that you're using the variable a for is the part over the whole. You actually do have the part out of 100, or the percent. I've given you that. It's 130%. So how many out of 100 would that be? Second part is you're always going to cross multiply to set those things even. Last but not least, you're going to isolate the variable. Do your best and give it a try. Pause the video and come back when you're ready to check your answer. Pause. Welcome back. Let's see how you did with this problem and these 3 steps of writing your own percent proportion equation, then cross multiplying and setting those 2 things equal, and isolating the variable to find the total number of party guests. So the information that we have is that there were 90 party guests expected. So that makes this number the denominator in our fraction. But whoa, it was a popular party because 130% actually showed up. So that is our percent in our percent proportion equation. So we know that some number of party guests out of the 90 that were expected is equal to 130%, or 130 out of 100. I could cross multiply this and do 90 times 130 and a times 100. I'm going to make this a little bit easier on myself. I know that 130 over 100, if I divide both the numerator and the denominator by 10, I get 13 tenths. So I'm going to use that instead. So that's step 1, is I have written this percent proportion equation. Let's do step 2, shall we? First, I'm going to multiply 90 by 13 in my Muggle calculating device. I get that that is equal to 1,170. I know that that is equal to 10 times A, or 10A. Thankfully, those numbers are both very easy to divide by 10. And I'm left with 117 is equal to A. So that means that we actually had 117 party guests show up. This was a little bit of a challenge because I gave you a percent that was over 100. So when you're writing your problem today, I want you to solve it before you put it in the comments, because you want to make sure it's a problem that actually works. So for instance, if I had said 129% showed up, then it would have been 116 and a fraction, which doesn't really work when we're talking about party guests. Okay, if you're bringing cookies to a party, that could be cool, that could work. But if you're talking about party guests, you cannot have a fraction of a party guest come. So in your question that you're going to write today in the comments below, before you post it, I want you to actually write it out on paper and solve it. Make sure it makes sense and it works. Then you're going to post it in the comments below. Find somebody else's problem to solve. I'm very proud of you for your hard work. Keep up the magic. Miss Cat, Professor of Math, over and out.